Hello, everybody. This is a little tutorial about how to get started with online Python so you can complete the matrix determinants with Python assignment in Buzz. So first off, I want to just give a brief overview of why I'm doing this and why Python. So I thought it would be interesting to make a program that can find the determinants of 3 by 3 matrices all by itself. This will help you understand how to find the determinants of 3 by 3 matrices, but also serve as a tool that you can use to find the determinants of matrices much faster than writing it out by hand. So I chose Python because it is a very simple to use programming language. It's very user friendly. It's great for beginners. And I chose this website because it's free, it's easy, and it takes all the hassle out of setup. I know that when starting on a new programming language, sometimes the hardest part is getting it set up. So this is a compiler, it's an IDE, an independent development environment, and it's where we are going to work on this assignment. So how you use this generally is you write your code up here. Code. And then once you're done writing, all you have to do is hit run, and it will execute all the code in this top part. And then if you have any print statements, they will be printed out down here in the console. This is a very common IDE setup. So you can upload a .py file, you can save your file, you can undo changes and redo changes. Here's the run button that we're going to click when we're done with our code. And then there's some tools on here for the console, but we don't really need to worry about that. We can have multiple Python scripts open at once. By just clicking here, it creates a new one. And I'm pretty sure the console is shared amongst all of them. So you might want to hit this clear button if you're working with multiple scripts. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete all of this. So the first program that all young programmers write, or I guess beginner programmers write, is called Hello World. And all that does is we're going to print the message Hello World to the console. And one of the reasons for Python is that the code basically writes itself. So if you want to print Hello World to the console, you simply say print parentheses, quotation marks, hello. Oops, I do this every time. Hello world. Right? And then we do run, and voila, hello world, and then process exited, and you don't need to worry about this stuff. But it just means the code ran to completion. And so this hello world in here, this is called a string, which basically just means it's treated as a collection of characters. It doesn't have, well, for all intents and purposes, it doesn't have a value, right? There's no value associated with this. It's just the phrase hello world. And print puts whatever is inside these parentheses in the console. So that is our very first program. So if we want to get a little more complicated here, we're going to go over variables. So we can print a whole story to the console. So we can say there once was a man named John. And on the next line we can say he was 35 years old. Making new print statements here. He really liked the name John, but didn't like being 35. So there's our story. I would not submit this story to Mr. Nielsen. I don't believe you would get a lot of credit for it. So we're going to hit run, and we're going to see what happens with this. So it prints out each statement on a new line, and I misspelled John. I'm going to go ahead and correct that. It prints out our little story here, our little poem, if you will. So that's all well and good. But one of the foundational concepts in programming is storing things in variables. So when we have variables in math, they're a stand-in for a number, some number, we don't know what it is. And in programming, we have variables and we assign values to them. So we're going to do a couple variables here. Character name. Typically, when you can't have spaces in a variable name, so just use an underscore when there's a space. So this is character name. I'm going to use the equal sign, but in programming, the equal sign isn't read as equals, it's read as gets, meaning that we are assigning a value or a string, as in this case, to this variable called character name. So character name gets all right. And then we're going to have another variable. We're going to call it character age. I'm going to say that that's 50. Right. And then what's cool about this is we can replace name in here with the variable. And how we do that is something called string concatenation. Basically, you can just say, you can add strings together and it just kind of smashes them together. So there once was a man named character name. And we want a comma after that. So we're going to add a comma just like that. And he was, oh, we got to break out of the string here. Character age. We got to add that. Years old. He really liked the name. We're just going to copy and paste here. Another fundamental part of programming, copy and paste. Why write the same code twice? And he didn't like being character age plus period. There we go. All right. But I'm going to run this and we're going to see what happens. Oh, there's an error. Line 6, which is this one. Oh, I forgot a plus sign. That'll do it. Let's try it again. All right, there once was a man named David. He was 50 years old. He really liked the name David. He didn't like being 50. We got some spacing issues. We can just go ahead and correct those real quick. So why do this? Why put in all this effort? Well, now we can change David to Nathan. Change character age from 50 to 15. Right? And we run it. Now it's Nathan and 15. So we can change these values up top and it changes it every time the variable is in there. So that's why we do variables. This doesn't have to be a string, right? We can assign numbers to these. So this can be 15 the number. Or run it. It should hopefully give us the same. Nope, it's angry. Oh, we can't add a number to a string. that's fine. But you can store numbers in here, and you can even store decimal numbers. Variables can take a number of different types of information into it. We would have to do a little more work to get this code to work. Anyway, that's variables. Another thing we can do is we can take input from the user. So we are writing this code, we are the developers, and then the people who use the code are the users. And so sometimes we want their input. And so again, in Python, it basically writes itself. When we want the input, we just say input. And then in here, we put a prompt, maybe enter your name. This code will prompt the user to enter in their name. It's not super helpful though. So what we're going to do is we're going to store this input in a variable. So we're going to say name gets input, enter your name. And then we're going to just say print your name is plus. Right. Your name. Your name is David, again with the spacing. Yeah, so that works. That's how input works. So it takes the input, takes what we type in here, it stores it in the name variable, and then we can print that out. That's basically input. And then you can have concurrent inputs. We can say, so here's name, say last name of another variable, get the input, enter your last name. I'm going to say your name is plus name plus a space plus last name. We'll hit run. First name, last name. See, it asks for it right after Brewy, and your name is David Brewy. Perfect. So that is input. Now we're going to talk about functions. So functions are usually multiple lines of code that we want to utilize in specific places. So it's kind of hard to conceptualize without looking at it. So how you write a function in Python is you use the keyword def. So we're going to do def. We're going to call this say hi. Again, in Python, when we're naming things, you can't have spaces. So we're going to use an underscore. And to let it know that this is a function, we're going to do parentheses and a colon. That's how you tell the compiler, tell the computer, hey, this is a function, is with the parentheses and the colon. So then when I hit enter, it indents it. And in a lot of programming languages, indentation doesn't matter. The compiler is just looking for specific symbols. In Python, that's not the case. In Python, the indentation does matter. So all of our lines of code in the function are going to be indented. So our say hi function is going to print hello every time. Hello user. They're just a very simple function. But now let's run it. Nothing happened. There's no error, right? I've already run into errors, so we know what that looks like. And it says it ran the code successfully, but nothing happened. So in order to execute the code in a function, we have to call it. And how we call it is we say its name. So our function say hi, we are going to call by writing say hi in parentheses. So now when we hit run, we get hello user. It executes the code. Even though our function is defined up here. It isn't called until down here. So when it's called, it executes the code inside the function. All right. Now another fundamental part of programming is conditional statements. You may remember these from geometry. These are like, if I have a rain jacket on, then it is raining outside. If it is raining, then traffic will be bad. If the dog is dirty, then I need to give it a bath. Stuff like that. If then statements. So we're going to make a little conditional statement here, a little if then statement. So I'm going to start off making a variable. We're going to call this variable is male. And we are going to set that to true. So this is called a Boolean variable. Boolean means it can only be true or false. So we're going to set this to true. And then we're going to make an if statement. We're going to do that by just typing if is male and colon. So in a conditional statement, it checks if what's in the statement is true or not. If it's true, it executes the code below it. So what we're going to say is we're going to print is male is true, you are male. All right. Only going to execute this code if the statement is true, and we have set the statement to true. So I'm going to run this program, and there we go. You are male. Now, if we set this to false, right? So now our if statement is false, nothing happens. The code is not executed. So the second part of an if then statement is the else clause. So with this statement it's if the variable is true, execute the code, and that's it. We can also say else print, we need a colon after else. There we go. Print are not male. All right. So we're going to set this back to true. So we do run. It says you are male. If we set this to false, our if statement is false, we'll execute the else code. You are not male. So if this is true, do this. Else do this. So that's kind of the basics of the if then else clause. We can have multiple variables. So we can have is male. We can also have is tall. And we are obviously going to set that to false. So we can say if is male and is tall. So we're going to say you are a tall male. Now we need a little more logic to parse this other stuff, but we'll get to that in a sec. Else you are not a tall male. So we can do two. We do two variables. Now here, with the and, both of them have to be true for it to execute this code. If not, it's going to execute this one. So I'm going to say we are male, but we're not tall, like me. So you are not a tall male. See that both statements have to be true. So we know if we're looking at both these variables, there are 4 possibilities. And in order to access all of them, we need more than just an if else. You need an else if. So with the else, you can put in another conditional statement. And in Python, you specify that by typing elif. And you put your statement. So is male and not, right, the opposite, not is tall. And if this happens, we're going to say print you are a short male. The other possibility, we're going to do another elif. Not is male and tall. All right, we're tall female. So I'm going to print you are not male and tall. You are tall. Last one is not to both. Just you are not tall or male. So if we want this second statement, you are a short male, male has to be true and tall has to be false, which is going to be this one. If we want you are a tall male, both of them have to be true. Or a tall male. If we want you are not male and are tall, is male has to be false and is tall has to be true. And if they are both false, we'll get this last one, you are not tall or male. All right, so that's how conditional statements work. It's not always checking if something is true. Well, it checks if the statement is true. So let me just do another example real quick. We're going to say number of children gets 1. Because I have one child, number of children gets 1. 1.0? Okay. We can say if num children, our new variable, is greater than 0, we're going to print you have you are a parent. Else you are childless. So we're going to run this. It says you are a parent. So now we're going to set this to 0. Remember, our condition is if number of children, this variable, is greater than 0. It's not going to include 0. It's going to say you are childless. Right. So it's this whole statement. If it's true, if it works out, then do this. Else, if it doesn't, do this. Can also do equals, right? But for the equal sign, we already used the equal sign for assignment, right? For gets. So if you want to say, hey, if this number is equal to something, or this variable is equal to something, you got to do 2. So now our, say 1 because it's kind of weird otherwise. So if we have one child, it'll say we're a parent, and if not, we're childless. You are a parent. If we were even to change this to 1.5, like how can you have 1.5 children, but just for the example. And now this statement is false because num children is not equal to 1.0. Excuse me. So that is conditional statements with comparisons. There's another thing. So Python has been worked on for a long time, and people have written a lot of functions or methods, as they're called in Python. And we don't need to figure out all that code. So what you can do is you can import a library. And libraries are just collections of functions and code that we can utilize, so we don't have to write it all ourselves. So how you do that, you say import, then the name of the library. The library we're going to use for this assignment is called NumPy. I didn't name it, so we're going to import NumPy. And then what we can do is we can give it a nickname. So we're going to say as NP. So let me just double check. Let me get that right. Yeah. So what that does is that gives us access to all the functions in the NumPy library. And the NumPy library has functions for arrays, or not arrays, for matrices, which we are going to use. It stores it as an array, but it's a matrix. Lastly is comments. So comments are not code. They're quite literally comments. And this is just for developers. This is say, hey, number of children variable. Comments are always started with a pound sign or a hashtag, right? And it turns it green. It's a little confusing because it's also the same as a string, but comments are not code. They are not compiled. They have no impact on the code. You could put comments wherever you want. Comment here. You put comment in here. It doesn't matter. So we're going to set this to 1. And I'm going to hit run. It's going to say you are a parent. There we go. Comments are just for developers to remind, maybe to remind yourself, remind another developer what something does. Yeah, they're really important in bigger programming projects because you could just be looking at a giant block of code and have no idea what it does or how it relates to the rest of the project. So that is pretty much the tutorial on the intro to Python and online Python IDE. This is by no means an exhaustive introduction to coding in general or computer science, but this is all the stuff you're going to need to know for the project. Anyway, as always, let me know if you have any questions, and good luck.